I never thought a piece of cake could change my life forever. There I was, Helen, 67 years old, watching as my daughter-in-law Linda picked up the porcelain plate my late mother had given me and smashed it against the kitchen floor. The pieces scattered everywhere, just like my heart in that moment. "I can't stand your stupidity anymore, old woman." She screamed at me with that voice I had learned to fear. "How dare you eat the last piece of cake I bought for Michael? You are shameless." I just stood there, trembling, my hands covered in flour because I was making dinner, the same dinner I had made every single day for the last 5 years, ever since I came to live with them after my husband died, the same dinner they never thanked me for. "Linda, please, I didn't know it was for Michael. I thought—" "Don't give me excuses," she interrupted, getting so close to my face I could smell her sour breath. "Ever since you came to this house, you've done nothing but cause problems. You eat our food, use our electricity, our water, and on top of that you have the nerve to steal my husband's cake. Steal." That word stabbed my chest like a dagger. I, who had raised Michael since he was born, who sold my jewelry to pay for his college, who worked double shifts at the factory so he would want for nothing. Now I was a thief in my own family. Michael appeared at the kitchen door, drawn by the shouting. My son, my only son. I thought he would defend me, that he would tell his wife to stop this madness. But when our eyes met, I saw something that broke my soul. Shame. He was ashamed of me, his own mother. "What happened in here?" he asked in a tired voice, as if I were a burden he had to bear. "Your mother ate your birthday cake," Linda said with that fake smile she used when she wanted to manipulate him. "The piece I saved especially for you after your long day at work." "Mom," Michael sighed, and rubbing his face, "we've told you 1,000 times to ask before you take something from the refrigerator." I felt like the world was collapsing on top of me. My own son, defending this woman who treated me worse than a maid. I remembered all the times Linda had screamed at me for using the upstairs bathroom, for sitting on the living room sofa, for turning on the television without permission. And Michael was always silent, always avoiding conflict, always choosing her over me. "You know what?" Linda said to Michael with a malicious smile. "I think it's time for your mother to find somewhere else to live. This house has gotten too small for all of us." The words fell like bombs in the silent kitchen. Michael said nothing. He just stared at the floor. And I understood. I understood that for 5 years, I had been living where I wasn't welcome, tolerated out of charity, enduring humiliation because I had nowhere else to go. "But Linda," I whispered. My voice cracking. "This house, it belonged to my husband. We bought it together 30 years ago. It was," she emphasized cruelly, "but now it's in Michael's name, and Michael is married to me. If you don't like how we run our home, there's the door." My mind flashed back to all the sacrifices I had made for this family. I remembered when Michael got married and they didn't have money for the down payment on the house. I signed the papers to transfer the property deed to him, trusting that I would always have a place in his home. I remembered the $15,000 I took from my savings to pay for their honeymoon, the $10,000 I lent them when Linda wanted to open her beauty salon, the money they never paid back. "Sure, Mom." Michael's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Maybe Linda is right. You could look for a small apartment, something more comfortable for you. Comfortable for me." As if the problem was my comfort, and not the fact that his wife hated me and he was too much of a coward to defend me. "I don't have money for an apartment, son," I told him, with the little dignity I had left. "Well," Linda shrugged indifferently, "then you'll have to get a job. People can perfectly well work at 67. A job, at my age, with my arthritic hands and my back that ached every morning. After I had already worked 40 years in the same factory until I retired. After I had raised Michael alone because his father worked day and night. In that moment, something inside me shattered. Not just my mother's plate, but something much deeper. The image I had of my family, the hope that things would get better, the illusion that my son loved me enough to protect me from his abusive wife. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake in my small room, the one that used to be Michael's study, remembering every moment that had led me to this hell. I looked at the four walls surrounding me, decorated with the few things I had managed to save from my old life. My wedding photo, my grandmother's rosary, the antique mirror my husband gave me on our 10th anniversary. How had I ended up here? When had I become this frightened woman who had to ask permission for everything in what used to be her own home? I remembered the day Michael was born. I was in labor for 18 hours, alone, because his father had to work an extra shift. When I finally held him in my arms, I swore that child would never know the poverty I had lived through. I worked in the textile factory ever since he was 6 months old, leaving him with my neighbor Abigail so I could pay for his diapers, his milk, his medicine. When Michael was 8 and wanted a bicycle for Christmas, I worked double shifts for 3 months. I remember my hands bleeding from the machines, my feet swollen from standing for 14 hours straight. But it was worth it to see his smile that December morning. When he turned 15 and all his friends had brand-name shoes, I sold my gold earrings, the only ones my mother had given me before she died. Michael never knew where the money came from for those shoes he wanted so badly, and when he graduated from high school and wanted to study engineering, I mortgaged the house I had inherited from my parents, $20,000. It had taken my family 2 generations to save it, and I bet it all on my son's future. He made it. He graduated with honors, got a good job. I was so proud. But then, Linda arrived. He met her at a company party where he worked. She was the manager's secretary, 10 years younger than Michael, with long nails and a shrill laugh. From the first day he brought her home, I knew she didn't want me around. The way she looked at me, as if I were something unpleasant to be tolerated. At first, it was little things, comments about my clothes. Oh, mother-in-law. Are you still wearing that green dress? It's so old-fashioned. Criticisms about my cooking. The soup is too salty. Don't you think? Suggestions about my appearance. You should cut your hair shorter. You'd look younger. Michael would always laugh nervously and ask me to ignore her, that Linda was just direct. But she had a good heart. A good heart. How naive my son was, or how blinded he had become by love. The wedding was the first big blow. Linda wanted a ceremony at the most expensive hotel in the city, with 300 guests and an imported dress. The total cost, $45,000. Michael earned good money, but not that much. So, once again, Mom to the rescue. "It's just a loan, Mom," he told me with those pleading eyes I'd known since he was a child. "I'll pay you back in a year. I promise." I cashed out my retirement plan. All the money I had saved for 20 years for my final days, gone, on flowers, musicians, and lobster for a wedding that lasted 6 hours. They never paid me back a single cent. Then came the house. The apartment they lived in was too small, according to Linda. They needed something bigger, more elegant, in a better neighborhood. They found the perfect house, $120,000. Michael had $30,000 saved, but he needed another $30,000 for the down payment for the mortgage. "Mom," he said to me one afternoon, while Linda pretended not to listen from the kitchen, "remember the house where you lived with Dad? It's in an area that's really appreciating in value. You could sell it and come live with us. That way you'd be close to family, and you could help us with the down payment. The house where I had lived for 30 years, where I had raised Michael, where I had cared for his sick father until his last days, where all my memories were. I sold it for $50,000 and gave them $30,000 for their new house. I kept the other $20,000 for my future expenses, not knowing it would become my only financial security. At first, living with them wasn't so bad. Michael worked all day and Linda went out a lot with her friends, so I had the house to myself most of the time. I cooked, I cleaned. I kept everything in order. I felt useful. But things changed when Linda quit her job. She decided she wanted to be a housewife and start a small business, a beauty salon, to be exact. The cost of the equipment, the rent for the space, and the decorations. Another $15,000. Where were they going to get that money? Mom, it's a safe investment. Michael explained to me while Linda beamed. In 2 years, we'll pay you back everything with interest. $15,000 more from my savings. I was left with only $5,000 from a lifetime of work. The beauty salon went bankrupt in 6 months. Linda said the people in that area had no class to appreciate her services, that it was just bad luck, that things would get better. But the money never came back, and I was left living off the charity of my son and his wife, off the miserable pension the government gave me, $300 a month that wasn't enough for anything. And that's when the real hell began. Linda started treating me like a maid. I had to get up at 5 in the morning to make breakfast. I washed the dishes, the clothes. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. If I protested, she would remind me that I was living in her house for free. "It's not that we don't love you, mother-in-law," she would tell me with that fake smile. "But you have to understand that this is a family, and families help each other." Help each other, while I did all the housework without so much as a thank you. The humiliations escalated. I couldn't use the main bathroom because it was only for Michael and Linda. My shower time was at 5 in the morning, before they got up. I couldn't watch television after 8 at night because it disturbed their sleep. I couldn't have visitors because the house wasn't a hotel. When my old neighbor Abigail came to see me, Linda treated her so coldly that the poor woman stopped coming. I was completely isolated, dependent on the goodwill of 2 people who clearly didn't want me there anymore. Michael saw all of this, but he always had an excuse, that Linda was stressed, that it was difficult for 3 adults to live in the same house, that I should be more understanding. Understanding. Me, who had sacrificed everything for him, and now, after 5 years of this hell, after giving every last cent of my savings, after becoming the unpaid maid for my own family, they were kicking me out of the house over a piece of cake. The next morning, Linda appeared in my room with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and a folder full of papers in her hands. It was barely 7 in the morning, but she was already perfectly dressed, as if she had been planning this moment for hours. "Good morning, mother-in-law," she said with that syrupy voice she used when she wanted something. "I hope you slept well, because we have important things to discuss." I sat up in bed, still in my nightgown, feeling vulnerable and small in front of this woman who had decided my fate the night before. Michael was standing in the doorway, avoiding my gaze, holding a coffee cup as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. "Look, Helen," Linda continued, sitting in the only chair in my room. "Michael and I talked all night, and we came to a decision that we think will be best for everyone." Best for everyone. What a nice way to say they were kicking me out. "We've decided to give you 1 month to find another place to live," she announced as if she were doing me a huge favor. 1 full month. That's more than enough time to get a small, comfortable apartment. An apartment? With what money I wanted to ask. But I stayed silent. I already knew my financial problems were not her concern. "And to make things easier for you," she went on, opening the folder, "we've prepared these documents. They're just legal formalities to protect the family." She held the papers out to me. There were several pages full of fine print, with official-looking stamps and marked spaces for signatures. I tried to read, but without my glasses, I couldn't make out the words. "What do they say?" I asked, and immediately felt stupid for sounding so helpless. "They're release forms," Michael finally explained, approaching the bed. "Basically, you waive any future claim on this property and acknowledge that you are leaving of your own free will." Waive free will, as if I had chosen this humiliation. "But Michael," my voice sounded weaker than I wanted. "Your father and I bought this house. I put down the down payment. Mom," he interrupted impatiently. That was 30 years ago. Things have changed. You transferred the property deed to my name when we got married. You no longer have any legal rights to this house." Legal rights? My own son was talking to me as if I were a stranger trying to scam him. "Besides," Linda interjected cruelly, "you've lived here for 5 years without paying rent, without paying utilities, eating our food. If we add it all up, you owe us about $20,000 in expenses." $20,000, the same amount I had given them from the sale of my house, but of course, they didn't remember that. "Also," she continued relentlessly, "there's the matter of all the damage you've caused. The plate you broke yesterday was an antique that cost $500, the stains on your room's carpet, the general wear and tear from your presents." Every word was a slap in the face. They were charging me for the privilege of being mistreated in what was once my home. "If you sign these papers," Michael said, avoiding my eyes, "we will waive those debts and let you leave in peace." In peace, as if I had the option of war. I took the papers with trembling hands. Without my glasses, the letters were blurry, but I could make out a few phrases. Total waiver of rights. Voluntary departure. No future claim. It was like signing my own civil death sentence. "And if I don't sign?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. Linda and Michael exchanged a look. He was the one who answered. "Then we would have to do this the legal way, an eviction lawsuit, seizing your belongings for the debts, that whole long, expensive process, and in the end, you'd still end up on the street, but with a legal record that would make it hard for you to find any other place to live." A legal record. My son was threatening to destroy my reputation if I didn't submit to his terms. I looked at Michael, searching for any trace of the boy I had raised. The young man who cried in my arms when he had nightmares. The man who had said, "Thank you for everything, Mom," on his graduation day. But I only saw a stranger with my son's face. A stranger who had chosen a manipulative woman over the mother who had given him everything. "Are you really going to do this, Michael?" I asked him directly, ignoring Linda's presence. "Are you really going to throw your mother out onto the street after everything I did for you?" For a moment, I saw a flash of doubt in his eyes. His hands trembled slightly around the coffee cup. I thought that maybe, just maybe, he would remember who I really was. But then Linda put her hand on Michael's shoulder, and that moment of hesitation vanished. "Mom, don't be dramatic," he told me in a cold voice. "We're not throwing you on the street. We're giving you a month to get organized. That's more than most families do." Most families, as if we were statistics instead of his own flesh and blood. "Besides," Linda added maliciously, "at your age, you should be grateful we put up with you for so long. Plenty of 67-year-old women live alone. They work. They support themselves. They don't depend on their children like little girls." Little girls. This woman, who had never worked a full day in her life, who had bankrupted her business in 6 months, who lived off the money her husband earned from the job I had paid for, was calling me dependent. Something broke inside me in that moment. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something much deeper and liberating. It was the final death of my illusions. The final acceptance that my son no longer existed, that he had been replaced by this selfish man who had his face. "All right," I said, with a calm that surprised even me. "I'll sign the papers." Michael looked relieved. Linda smiled in triumph. Neither of them realized that something fundamental had changed in me. I took the pen Linda offered and signed every page without reading any further. Helen J. Miller. My full name on documents that sealed my exile from the family I had created. "Very good," Linda said, collecting the papers as if they were a treasure. "We'll give you a copy for your records. And remember, 1 month, until the 15th of next month." They left my room as if nothing had happened, leaving me alone with the echo of my own decisions. But for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel defeated. I felt free. Free from the obligation to love people who didn't love me back. Free from the need to justify my existence. Free from the hope that had kept me prisoner to my own kindness. I got out of bed, got dressed in my prettiest dress, the green one Linda hated so much, and walked out of the house. I had an important call to make. I walked through the streets of my old neighborhood as if I were a tourist in my own life. I hadn't left the house alone in months. I always had to ask permission, give explanations, justify every move. But now, with the signed papers in my purse, I felt strangely liberated from those invisible chains. My destination was the office of Mr. David Evans, the lawyer who had handled my family's legal affairs for years. He had drafted my husband's will. He had handled the sale of my house. He knew every detail of my financial situation. If anyone could help me understand what options I had left, it was him. The secretary recognized me immediately. She was an older woman, my age, who had always treated me with respect and kindness. Mrs. Miller. Mrs. What a pleasure to see you. How is the family? The family. What a painful irony. Fine. Karen. Thank you. Is Mr. Evans available? I need to consult him about something urgent. Of course. Please. Go right in. He always has time for you. Mr. Evans was a man in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes. He had been friends with my husband since they were young and had always treated me like his own family. When I entered his office, his smile faded when he saw my expression. Helen, what happened? You look different. I sat in the chair across from his desk and took out the papers I had signed that morning. I handed them to him without a word. David reviewed them with professional attention, frowning as he read. When he finished, he looked up at me with a mixture of surprise and concern. Helen, you signed this. This morning, Michael and Linda told me it was necessary to make things easier. Make what easier? His voice had a tone of alarm I hadn't heard before. I told him everything. The humiliation over the cake, the 5 years of mistreatment, the eviction from the house, the legal threats. I spoke for half an hour without stopping, as if it were a confession I had been holding in for years. When I finished, David was silent for a long time, drumming his fingers on the desk. Helen, he finally said, these documents are a legal disaster. Michael is having you waive rights you probably didn't even know you had. What do you mean? First, the house. It's true you transferred the deed to Michael's name when he got married, but under state family property law, you likely retained lifetime residency rights. That means you had the legal right to live there until your death. Lifetime residency rights, words that sounded important, but came too late. Second, he continued, the expenses they're charging you for. Living with family doesn't automatically create debt, especially when you substantially contributed to the property's acquisition. But I already signed, I whispered, feeling more foolish than ever. Documents signed under emotional duress can be annulled, he explained, but it's a complicated and expensive process. Expensive, the word that always ended my hopes. David, I don't have money for legal proceedings. I only have $5,000 left from all my savings. I know. Helen, I know your financial situation better than anyone. He fell silent again, looking out the window as if making an important decision. Then he opened a desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder with my name on it. Helen, there's something I have to tell you. Something that arrived 3 days ago, and I was going to call you about. But with all this... He opened the folder and took out several official documents with stamps and signatures. Your brother Daniel died. Daniel. The words hit me like cold water. Daniel, my older brother, 5 years older than me. We had lost touch over a decade ago after a stupid family argument. He had moved away, made his life here in the U.S. He had married an American woman. I knew he was doing well in business, but we hadn't spoken since our father's death. When? I asked, my voice breaking. A month ago. He died of a heart attack at his home in Dallas. He had no children. His wife had died 2 years earlier from cancer. A month. My brother had been dead for a month, and I didn't know. While I was enduring humiliation over a piece of cake, Daniel had left this world without us ever reconciling. His lawyer in Dallas contacted me because Daniel had named you the executor of his will. Will. David smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Helen, your brother left you everything. Absolutely everything. What do you mean, everything? His construction company, his properties, his investments, his bank accounts. It all adds up to approximately $8 million. $8 million. The figure sounded so absurd I thought I had misheard. You said 8 million. 8 million US dollars. Helen, your brother was a very successful man. He built shopping centers in Texas. His businesses were worth a fortune. I was paralyzed. $8 million. Who had been worrying about how I was going to pay $500 a month for an apartment, had just become a millionaire. There's a personal letter for you, David said, pulling out a sealed envelope. Daniel wrote it 6 months ago, when he was diagnosed with heart problems. I opened the letter with trembling hands, my brother's handwriting, which I hadn't seen in years. Dear Helen, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer in this world, and you're finally going to know the truth about my life. I always admired you for your strength, sister. When Dad got sick and I left like a coward to find a better life, you stayed to take care of him. When Mom needed surgery, I sent money, but you gave your time, your love, your life. I built a fortune here, but I never had the courage to call you after our stupid fight. My pride was stronger than my brotherly love. Now that I know my time is short, I want to fix that mistake. Everything I have is yours, not because you need charity, but because it belongs to you by right. You're the one who always gave everything for the family without asking for anything in return. Use this money to be free, sister, to live as you deserve to live, with love and regret. Your brother, Daniel. Tears streamed down my face as I read my dead brother's words of love that came at the exact moment I needed them most. The legal paperwork will take about 6 weeks, David explained. I have to coordinate with the lawyer in Dallas, transfer the property titles, open bank accounts here, but everything is in order. Your brother made sure it would be a clean process. David, I said, wiping away my tears, do Michael and Linda know anything about this? No, and they don't have to know until you decide what to do with the information. A smile slowly formed on my face. For the first time in years, a real smile, one that came from the heart. You know what, David? I think I'm going to keep this a secret for a while. I have a few things to do first. What kind of things? Family business, I replied, thinking of the papers I had signed that morning. There are some outstanding debts that I need to settle. I left the lawyer's office feeling like I was floating on air. $8 million. Absolute freedom, the power to choose my own life for the first time since my husband died. But more than the money, what filled me with energy was the sense of poetic justice. After 5 years of being treated like a burden, like a beggar in my own family, I now had the power to change all the rules of the game. I walked back to the house that was no longer mine, with a smile I couldn't erase. Michael and Linda had no idea what was coming for them. The real war was just beginning. The next few days were the strangest of my life. On the outside, I was still the same submissive Helen who washed dishes and swept floors without complaining. But on the inside, something had completely changed. It was as if I had woken up from a 5-year-long dream and could finally see reality with absolute clarity. Michael and Linda noticed my different attitude, but they interpreted it as resignation. They thought I had accepted my fate and was finally behaving like the good loser they expected me to be. It's good you've finally seen reason, mother-in-law, Linda told me on the second day after I signed the papers. You seem more relaxed. You're probably relieved to not have the pressure of maintaining such a big house anymore. Maintaining a house. As if I hadn't been the one keeping it running for 5 years while she painted her nails and watched soap operas. Yes, I replied with a smile she took for submission. I feel very liberated. Michael also seemed more relaxed around me. He even dared to be kind, as if signing my eviction notice had restored his filial affection. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said to me one night at dinner. "Maybe I can help you find a nice little apartment, something close by, so we can visit each other often." Visit each other often. How funny that sounded coming from the man who hadn't visited me once in 5 years, despite living in the same house. "That would be very nice, son," I replied with the same mysterious smile. Meanwhile, I used every free moment to plan my new life. I called David several times to speed up the inheritance paperwork. I asked him to be discreet, to handle everything from his office without involving me visibly in the process. "Are you sure you want to keep this a secret?" he asked during one of our calls. $8 million isn't something you can hide forever." "I just need a few more weeks," I explained. "I have a plan." The plan began to take shape when I remembered a conversation I had overheard between Michael and Linda the week before. They were talking about their financial problems, thinking I couldn't hear them from the kitchen. "The car loan payment is due next month," Michael had told his wife. "It's $8,000 that we don't have." "And the credit card is maxed out," Linda had replied, worried. $12,000. We can barely make the interest payments, not to mention the mortgage on the house, which has 15 years left. We still owe $90,000. $90,000 on the mortgage. On the house I had originally paid for. The one I had put this down payment on. The one I had invested my life savings into. That night, while they slept, I went down to the living room and discreetly looked through the papers they always left on the dining table. Bills, bank statements, letters from the bank. The situation was worse than I had heard. Michael earned $4,000 a month, but their expenses were almost $5,000. They were covering the difference with credit cards and loans that were becoming increasingly unpayable. In 6 months, a year at most, they would be bankrupt. And that's when I had the most brilliant idea of my life. The next day, while Linda was at the salon getting her nails done, I sat down with Michael in the kitchen. "Son," I said in a worried voice, "I've been thinking about my financial situation." "What's wrong, Mom?" "Well, you know I only have $5,000 saved. It's not enough to rent a place and support myself until I find a job." And Michael looked uncomfortable, as he always did when we talked about money. "Mom, I already told you, we'll help you find something affordable." No, I interrupted him. "I don't want to be any more of a burden to you. You've already done enough by putting up with me for so long." I saw him relax when he heard I wasn't going to ask for money. "But I had an idea," I continued, "and I want to know what you think." "What idea?" "Do you remember my friend Abigail, the one who lived next to our old house?" "Yeah, sure." "Well, it turns out her brother died last month and left her a small house downtown. Abigail already has her own house, and she wants to sell this property quickly." Michael listened attentively, but he still didn't see where my story was going. "The house is worth about $30,000, but Abigail told me she would sell it to me for $20,000, because we're lifelong friends." "Mom, but you don't have $20,000. "I know, but I had an idea. What if you lend me the $15,000 I'm missing? I'll put in my $5,000 saved. You lend me $15,000, and I'll buy the little house. Then I'll pay you back, little by little, with my pension." Michael grew thoughtful. I could see the gears turning in his head. "And where am I supposed to get $15,000, Mom?" "Well," I said, as if the idea had just occurred to me, "you could get a loan with the house as collateral. It's a safe investment, because the property I'm going to buy is worth more than what I'll pay for it. A home equity loan. Exactly what I needed for the most delicious part of my plan." "I don't know, Mom. I'd have to talk to Linda about it." "Of course. Think it over. I'm just saying, it would be the perfect solution for everyone. I would have my own house, and you two would have your complete privacy." That night, I heard Michael and Linda discussing it in their room. The walls in that house were thinner than they thought. "It's a good idea," Linda was saying. "We get rid of her forever, and we even make some money." "What do you mean, make money?" "Think about it, Michael. We lend her $15,000 to buy her house. She'll pay us back with her pension, which is $300 a month. In 5 years, she'll have paid us $18,000. We make $3,000 in interest. But what if she can't pay? Then we get the house she bought, which is worth $30,000. It's a guaranteed win no matter how you look at it." Guaranteed win. How adorable they were in their greed. "Besides," Linda continued, "with the money we'll save on food and utilities when she's gone, the loan will practically pay for itself." The next day, Michael gave me the good news. "Mom, I talked to Linda and we agree. We're going to lend you the $15,000 for your house." "Oh, Michael, you're the best son in the world." I feigned tears of gratitude, while inside I was laughing at how easy it had been to manipulate them. They, who thought they were using me, had just walked right into my trap. "I'm going to the bank this afternoon to apply for the loan," he told me. "With the house as collateral, there shouldn't be any problem." "And I'll call Abigail to close the deal," I lied shamelessly. Of course, Abigail didn't exist, nor did her dead brother, or the house for sale, but Michael and Linda wouldn't know that until it was too late. That afternoon, while Michael was at the bank mortgaging his house to give me a loan he thought was for my benefit, I was at David's office, finalizing the details of my inheritance. "The papers arrived from Dallas this morning," he informed me. "You can now access the bank accounts. The $8 million is officially at your disposal." $8 million that Michael and Linda didn't know existed. $15,000 they were going to lend me, thinking they were doing me a favor, and a revenge plan that would make the coming months the most interesting of my life. "David," I said with a smile he hadn't seen in years, "I need you to prepare some more documents, and I also need you to recommend the best private detective in the city." "A private detective, Helen. What are you planning?" "Justice," I replied simply. "Pure, sweet justice." Michael returned from the bank that afternoon with a radiant look of satisfaction. He had gotten the $15,000 home equity loan without any problem, just as he expected. The bank knew his credit history, knew he had a stable job, and the house was more than enough collateral for such a small loan. "Everything went perfectly, Mom," he announced, while Linda smiled at his side as if they had just performed the charitable deed of the century. "The money will be available tomorrow morning." "That's wonderful, son," I exclaimed with genuine enthusiasm, though for completely different reasons than they imagined. "I don't know how to thank you for this huge favor." "It's the least we can do," Linda said with that fake smile I knew so well. "After all, we're family." Family. What a flexible word in that woman's mouth. That night, after they went to sleep, I called David from my old cell phone, whispering from my room. "The bait worked perfectly," I reported. "Tomorrow they're going to deposit $15,000 into my account." "Helen, I hope you know what you're doing. What you're planning is creative, but also dangerous." "David, they stole more than $100,000 from me over the years. The $30,000 for the house down payment, the $15,000 for the beauty salon, the $45,000 for the wedding, plus 5 years of unpaid domestic labor. If we calculate it all with interest, they owe me close to $200,000. Morally, you're right. But that doesn't mean it's legal. That's why I need everything to be perfectly documented. Every step, every transaction, every move. There can be no legal mistakes." "All right. I trust you. But be very careful." The next day, Michael accompanied me to the bank to make the deposit. He wanted to make sure the money went directly to the purchase of my supposed new house. Of course, I had prepared all the necessary theatrics. "Abigail told me to meet her directly at the title company," I explained as we walked to the bank. She's going to bring all the property deeds, and I'll bring the money. That way we can close the deal at once. Are you sure you don't want me to go with you? That's a lot of money to carry around alone. No, son, don't worry. Abigail will be with me, and the title company is only 3 blocks from the bank. Besides, you have to work. At the bank. Michael deposited the $15,000 into my account. I added my $5,000 in savings, as we had agreed. $20,000 that, according to them, would be used to buy my new house. There you go, Mom, Michael said, handing me the deposit slip. There's your $20,000. I hope you'll be very happy in your new house. I'm sure I am going to be immensely happy, I replied, with a smile he interpreted as motherly gratitude. We said goodbye at the bank's entrance. Michael went to work, convinced he had solved his mother's problem forever. I headed to David's office to set the second phase of my plan in motion. Are the documents ready? I asked as soon as I entered his office. Everything's right here, he said, pointing to a stack of papers on his desk. But Helen, once we do this, there's no going back. David, there's been no going back for me since the moment I was kicked out of my own home. Now it's my turn to move the pieces on the board. The documents were a legal work of art. David had used all his expertise to create a perfectly legal web that Michael and Linda wouldn't see coming until it was too late. First, he had created a shell corporation called Abigail Properties LLC, with a business address at a colleague's office in another city. Second, he had prepared fake deeds for a non-existent property that, on paper, looked completely legitimate. Third, he had set up a corporate bank account where the $20,000 from the purchase would be deposited. The beauty of the plan, David explained, is that technically you're not stealing anything. Michael voluntarily lent you money for a real estate investment. The fact that this investment isn't what he thinks, well, that's another story. That afternoon, I called Michael from the supposed title company. Michael, it's done. I just bought the house. That's great news, Mom. How is it? Do you like it? It's perfect. Small, but cozy. It has 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a beautiful backyard. Abigail was right. It's a steal for $20,000. I'm so glad, Mom. When are you going to move? Well, the house needs a few minor repairs. Abigail recommended a contractor who can do it all in a week. In the meantime, if it's not too much trouble, I'll stay these last few days with you. Of course it's no trouble. This is your home until you officially move. His home. What delicious irony. During that week, while Michael and Linda discreetly celebrated my upcoming departure, I was working on the third phase of my plan. I had hired the private detective David recommended, a man named Arthur who had been a cop for 20 years before opening his own agency. What kind of investigation do you need, ma'am? He had asked during our first meeting. I want you to thoroughly investigate the finances of my son Michael and my daughter-in-law Linda. Their debts, their income, their assets, their bank transactions, everything. May I ask why? Because I'm going to buy their debts. Arthur looked at me with surprise, but he was too professional to ask unnecessary questions. Understood. How deep do you want the investigation? Everything. Absolutely everything, no matter what it costs. The results came back 3 days later. Arthur had done an impeccable job. Michael and Linda weren't just in financial trouble. They were on the brink of total economic collapse. They owed $12,000 in credit card debt with 25% annual interest. They owed $8,000 on the car loan with $400 monthly payments. They owed $90,000 on the house mortgage with $800 monthly payments. And now, they owed another $15,000 for the loan they had given me, with an additional $300 in monthly payments. In total, their debts added up to $125,000, with monthly payments of $1,500. More than 30% of Michael's income was going to debt, not counting household expenses, food, and utilities. But the most interesting part was who the creditors were. The credit cards belonged to a large bank that frequently sold off bad debt portfolios. The car loan was with a finance company that also tended to sell its problem debts. The house mortgage was with an institution known for negotiating with private investors. "Arthur," I said after reviewing the report, "I need you to find out how I can buy all of these debts." "Buy them, ma'am. That requires significant capital." "I have the capital. I just need to know the process." Buying debt was simpler than I had imagined. Banks and finance companies regularly sold their delinquent portfolios to specialized collection agencies, usually for 40 or 50% of the nominal value. With the right contacts and enough money, anyone could become the creditor for someone else's debts. The process can take between 2 and 4 weeks, an investment specialist David had recommended explained to me. But with your available capital, you could acquire all those debts for approximately $60,000. $60,000 to become the legal owner of all of Michael and Linda's debts. $60,000 to have the power to decide whether to give them payment plans or to call in all the loans at once. "Do it," I ordered without hesitation. While the wheels of justice began to turn silently, I continued to play my role of the grateful mother in the house. I cooked, I cleaned, I smiled when they spoke to me. Michael and Linda were so excited about my departure that they had even become nice to me. "You're going to miss cooking for us, aren't you, mother-in-law?" Linda said to me one night at dinner. "Oh, yes," I replied with perfect sincerity, "but I'm sure you'll find a way to manage without me." Of course, Michael is a great cook when he wants to be. "Right, honey?" Michael nodded with his mouth full, having no idea that in 2 weeks he'd be cooking all his own meals because they would no longer be able to afford me or any other help. "And you'll be in your new little house," Linda continued, "independent, free, without the complications of living with family." Independent and free. If only she knew how free I was about to become. That night, before bed, I checked my phone and found a message from David. "It's all set. The collection agencies accepted the offer. In 1 week, you will be the legal owner of all their debts." 1 more week. I just had to keep up the act for 1 more week. And then I could reveal my true identity. Not the submissive, grateful Helen they had known for 5 years, but the new Helen, the millionaire, the creditor, the one who held all the power, the one who was going to teach them what it really meant to be kicked out of your own home. The day came sooner than I expected. A week later, David called me early in the morning with the news I had been waiting for. "Helen, it's done. You are officially the owner of all of Michael and Linda's debts. $125,000 that they now owe directly to you." I hung up the phone and sat on my bed, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. In 1 week, I had gone from being a woman kicked out of her home to being the primary creditor for the very people who had kicked me out. Michael and Linda had no idea what was coming. That morning, at breakfast, I acted as I always did. I served coffee, made scrambled eggs, kept up the trivial conversation about the weather and the day's plans. "Mom," Michael said as he was getting ready for work, "do you know when you're moving out for good?" "Very soon, son. I'm just waiting for them to finish the last few repairs." "How exciting!" Linda exclaimed with false enthusiasm. "Your new independent life is about to begin." My new independent life. If only she knew. After Michael left for work and Linda locked herself in her room to watch her morning soap operas, I headed to David's office to receive all the official documents certifying me as the new creditor. "Here are all the contracts," he said, handing me a thick folder. "The credit cards, the car loan, the $15,000 equity loan they gave you, and most importantly, you have the right to demand immediate payment of the main mortgage on the house if they miss a single payment." "How does that work?" "Exactly. Simple. If Michael and Linda fall behind on any payment for more than 30 days, you can exercise your right as the primary creditor and demand full and immediate payment of all debts. If they can't pay, you proceed with foreclosure." "Foreclosure?" The word sounded beautiful to my ears. And how long do they have before they start running into trouble? David checked his papers and smiled. According to my calculations, with their current expenses and the new loan they took out for you, they'll start missing payments within 2 months, max. But I had no intention of waiting that long. David, what would happen if I decided to demand immediate payment of the $15,000 loan? The one for the fake house. Exactly. Well, technically, you have every right. It was a personal loan without specific collateral, beyond a promise to pay. You can demand it whenever you want. And if they can't pay, then you can sue them for breach of contract and seize their assets to recover your money. That afternoon, as I was preparing dinner, I decided the time had come to begin the final phase of my plan. Michael came home tired, as always, and sat at the table waiting for me to serve him his food. "Michael," I said, as I put the plate in front of him, "I need to talk to you about something important." "What's wrong, Mom?" "It's about the money you lent me." Michael looked up curiously. Linda, who had appeared in the kitchen, drawn by the conversation, moved closer to listen. "What about the money?" Linda asked, slightly worried. "Well, it turns out there was a problem with the house." "What kind of problem?" Michael stopped eating. "Abigail spoke to me this morning. Apparently, there's a legal problem with the property. The brother who died had debts we didn't know about, and the creditors are claiming the house." I watched Michael's face turn pale. "What does that mean, Mom?" "It means I can't keep the house. The lawyers say the whole process is going to take months to resolve, maybe years." "And the money?" Linda asked in a sharp voice. "That's the problem. Since the sale was canceled, I have to return the $20,000. But Abigail had already spent part of the money to pay some of her brother's urgent debts." Michael and Linda stared at each other in horror. "How much can she return?" Michael asked. "Only $5,000. The other $15,000, it's lost." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the gears turning in their heads, trying to process the scale of the disaster. "But Mom," Michael said, his voice trembling, "that $15,000, I took that out on the house mortgage. I have to pay it back, monthly." "I know, son, and I feel terrible, but it wasn't my fault. It was Abigail who didn't tell us about the legal problems." "So what are we going to do now?" Linda yelled. "We don't have $15,000 to give back to the bank." "Calm down," I told them in a steady voice. "I've been thinking about a solution." "What solution?" they asked in unison. "Well, I could stay here a little longer until we resolve this, and I could help you pay off that debt gradually. With my pension." "How?" Michael looked desperate. "My pension is $300 a month. If I stayed here and gave you all of that money to pay the debt, we'd have it paid off in 5 years. 5 more years of having me in the house." I could see the horror in Linda's eyes. "But, mother-in-law," she said, trying to keep her composure, "you already signed the release forms. You can't legally live here anymore." "Ah, yes, the forms," I said, as if I had almost forgotten. "Well, I suppose we'd have to nullify those documents. After all, they were signed under the premise that I would have my own house." "Nullify the forms." Michael looked confused. "Yes, since the situation has changed completely. We'd have to return everything to its original state." I watched Linda and Michael exchange panicked glances. They had been counting on my departure. They had made plans. Linda had already started converting my room into her extra closet. "Mom," Michael said finally, "is there no other solution?" "Well," I pretended to think it over carefully. "I suppose you could get the money from another source and pay back the $15,000 immediately. That way I could look for another house, and you'd be free of the debt." "Where are we going to get $15,000? Linda shrieked. "I don't know," I said, shrugging. "Maybe another loan, or selling something of value, or asking family for help." "My family doesn't have money," Michael mumbled. "And neither does mine," Linda added. "Then, I suppose the only option is for me to stay here and pay you back, little by little, with my pension." The rest of the dinner passed in deathly silence. Michael and Linda barely touched their food, too busy processing their new reality. Not only had they failed to get rid of me, but now they were in debt and legally bound to keep me in the house. That night, I heard them arguing in their room until late. Their voices carried through the walls like music to my ears. "This is a disaster," Linda was screaming. "Now we're stuck with her forever. What did you want me to do if I didn't lend her the money? We'd look like the heartless kids who threw their mother out on the street. But now we have a $15,000 debt that we can't pay. At least she's going to help with $300 a month." $300? The loan payment is $350 a month. We're going to have to find an extra $50 every month for 5 years. What other choice do we have? The argument continued until they fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. I, on the other hand, slept like a baby, knowing that the most entertaining part of my revenge would begin the next day, because they didn't know that I was their new creditor. They didn't know I had $8 million in the bank. They didn't know that every move they had made for the past week had been orchestrated by me. And they definitely had no idea what was waiting for them in the days to come. The following days were like a play where I was the only one who knew the ending. Michael and Linda tried to maintain a facade of normality, but the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Their conversations had become nervous whispers. Their eyes were constantly filled with worry. And for the first time in 5 years, they treated me with a forced politeness that was almost ridiculous. "Can I get you more coffee, mother-in-law?" Linda would ask at breakfast, when before she would yell if I dared to use her good cups. "Are you comfortable in your room, Mom?" Michael would ask, when before he had made me feel like an intruder in my own home. I enjoyed every second of their discomfort, but I maintained my facade of the grateful mother, worried about their financial situation. "Don't worry about me," I'd tell them with a maternal smile. "The important thing is that we get through this together, as a family." Family. That word had a completely different taste in my mouth now. On Wednesday of that week, I decided to accelerate events. I called David from my room and gave him the final instructions. "It's time to collect," I said simply. "All the debts, all of them. I want you to officially notify them that their loans have been transferred to a new creditor and that immediate payment is required." "Helen, are you sure?" "Once you do this, you can't play the innocent victim anymore." "David, I stopped being innocent 5 years ago. Now, I want to be powerful." That afternoon, while Michael was at work and Linda was watching her soap operas, the first messenger arrived. A uniformed young man knocked on the door with an official envelope addressed to Michael and Linda Miller. "What is it?" Linda asked, taking the envelope suspiciously. "Legal notification, ma'am. I need you to sign for it." Linda signed and closed the door, staring at the envelope as if it were a bomb. She just stood there in the living room for several minutes, not daring to open it. "What's wrong, dear?" I asked with genuine, motherly concern. "I don't know, mother-in-law. It's something legal. We'd better wait for Michael to get home." 30 minutes later, the second messenger arrived, another official envelope, then the third. By the time Michael got home from work at 6, there were 4 official envelopes waiting for him on the dining room table. "What is all this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I haven't opened them," Linda said. "I wanted to wait for you." Michael picked up the first envelope and tore it open with shaking hands. His face went pale as he read. "What does it say?" Linda asked. It's from the credit card company. They're saying our debt was sold to a collection agency, and they're demanding immediate payment of the $12,000. "Immediate payment? Why?" Michael opened the second envelope. "This one is from the car loan. They sold the debt too. They're demanding immediate payment of $8,000. The third was from the home equity company, $15,000, immediate payment. The fourth was from a company they had never heard of, claiming $90,000 for the main mortgage on the house. "I don't understand," Linda muttered. "Why would all the companies sell our debts at the same time?" "I don't know." Michael reviewed the papers again and again. "This can't be legal. We have a right to make installment payments." "It says here," he read aloud, "that the new creditor can demand immediate payment if they deem there is a risk of default." "What company is it?" Linda asked. Michael checked all the documents. "It's called Justice Collections and Recoveries, Inc. I've never heard of it." I listened to it all from the kitchen while I prepared dinner, holding back my laughter. Justice Inc. had been David's idea, a little poetic touch for the name of the shell company we'd created to handle the collections. "What are we going to do?" Linda moaned. "That's $125,000. We don't have that kind of money." "I'll call them tomorrow," Michael said, with more confidence than he felt. "This has to be a mistake. Companies don't just sell all of a person's debts at the same time." The next day, Michael called the number on the notifications. The call was answered by David's secretary, who was perfectly trained for her role. "Good morning, Justice Collections and Recoveries. How can I help you? This is Michael Miller. I received some notifications about my debts, and I think there's a mistake." "One moment, Mr. Miller. I'll connect you with our legal department." David picked up the call, modulating his voice so Michael wouldn't recognize him. "Mr. Miller, this is Mr. Johnson. I've reviewed your case. And there is no mistake. Your credit profile was assessed as high risk, and our firm decided to exercise its right to demand immediate payment." "But I've never been late on my payments." "It's not just about late payments, Mr. Miller. It's about future ability to pay. Our analysis indicates that you are on the path to bankruptcy, and we prefer to recover our money now." "That's ridiculous. I have a stable job. I've never—" "Mr. Miller, is it true that you recently took out an additional home equity loan for $15,000? Michael went quiet. "Is it true that your monthly expenses exceed your income by approximately $800? More silence. "Is it true that you have been using credit cards to pay for basic living expenses? That's temporary." "Mr. Miller, our analysis is correct. You represent an unacceptable credit risk. You have 30 days to settle all your payments, or we will proceed with legal action." "Legal action? Foreclosure? Wage garnishment? Seizing assets? Everything within our legal rights." Michael hung up the phone, his hands shaking. That night, the argument in their room was epic. "This is your fault," Linda screamed. "If you hadn't lent that $15,000 to your mother, we wouldn't be in this situation. My fault, you were the one who insisted on kicking my mom out of the house, because we couldn't afford to keep her, and now it turns out we can't keep the house without her. What are we going to do, Michael? Where are we going to get $125,000? "I don't know. Maybe we could sell the house." "Sell the house? And where are we going to live?" "In a small apartment. At least we'd be out of debt." "No. This is my house. I'm not going to live in some miserable apartment." The argument continued late into the night. I fell asleep, lulled by the sound of their marriage crumbling. The next day, Michael came home with a desperate proposal. "Mom," he said during dinner, "I need to ask you a very big favor." "Of course, son. Tell me what you need. Do you know anyone who could lend us money? It's a very difficult situation." "How much money do you need?" "A lot, like $125,000. I feigned surprise. "My goodness, Michael, that much. What happened?" Michael explained the whole situation, conveniently omitting that it all started because they wanted to kick me out of the house. "That's terrible," I said, shaking my head with concern. "And what will you do if you can't get the money?" "We don't know. We might have to sell the house." "Sell the house!" I exclaimed with fake horror. "But Michael, this house has so many memories. Your father and I bought it when you were little. You grew up here. You became a man here." I saw tears forming in my son's eyes. For the first time in years, He seemed to remember who he really was. "I know, Mom, but I don't see any other option." "Let me think," I said, as if I were truly searching for a solution. Maybe I can help somehow." "How, Mom?" "You don't have any money." "No, but I have contacts, people I met during all my years of work. Let me make some calls, talk to some people. Maybe I can find someone willing to help." For the first time in weeks, I saw hope in Michael's eyes. "You'd really do that for us, Mom." "Michael," I said, taking his hand, "you are my only son. I would do anything to protect my family." That night, while they slept restlessly, I planned the final blow, the moment I would reveal who really held the power in this house, the moment the submissive mother would become the most powerful woman they had ever known. The moment I had been waiting for months had finally arrived. It was Friday afternoon, and Michael and Linda were sitting in the living room, surrounded by financial papers, calculators, and bills, desperately trying to find a solution to their crisis. They had spent all week calling banks, family, friends, anyone who might lend them money, without success. "Mom," Michael said when I entered the living room, "were you able to talk to your contacts?" "Yes, son," I replied in a serious voice. "In fact, I have very good news." Both of their eyes lit up immediately. "You found someone willing to help?" Linda asked anxiously. "Better than that," I said, sitting down across from them. "I found someone who is willing to buy all of your debts and give you a much more flexible payment plan." Michael leaned forward. "Really, who?" "She's a private investor who specializes in helping families in financial crisis. A very successful, very powerful woman who has a lot of money and likes to help people." "What's her name?" Linda asked. "Well," I smiled slowly, "her name is Helen J. Miller." There was a confused silence. Michael frowned. "Mom, that's your name." "Exactly." The silence became deafening. I watched their brains slowly process what I had just said. "Mom," Michael said, his voice trembling. "What are you saying?" I stood up from the chair and walked to the window, turning my back to them dramatically. "What I'm saying, Michael, is that I am your new creditor. I bought all of your debts. The $125,000 you owe to me." "That's impossible," Linda shouted. "You don't have any money." I turned slowly to face them, and for the first time in 5 years, my smile was absolutely genuine. "I don't have money. My dear Linda, I just inherited $8 million from my brother Daniel." $8 million. Michael looked like he was going to faint. $8 million US. My brother died 2 months ago and left me his entire fortune, his construction company in Texas, his properties, his investments, everything. Linda staggered to her feet. "You're crazy. That can't be true." I took the official inheritance documents from my purse and threw them onto the table. "Here are the papers, signed by lawyers in Dallas, and here, every cent is documented and completely legal." Michael picked up the documents with trembling hands and began to read. His face grew paler with every page. This says you're the owner of multiple commercial properties, bank accounts with millions of dollars. And also," I interrupted, "I am the owner of all your debts. Do you know what my collection agency is called? Justice, Inc.? A very fitting name. Don't you think—" Linda collapsed onto the sofa as if she'd been shot. You're the company that's collecting from us." "Of course. Did you think I was going to let some strangers decide your fate? No, my dears. I wanted to have that pleasure personally." "But Mom—" Michael looked like he was about to cry. Why would you do this to us?" I walked slowly toward him, and my voice turned cold as steel. "Why, Michael, are you really asking me why? We took care of you for 5 years." "Took care of me." My laughter echoed through the house. "Michael, you treated me like a maid for 5 years. You humiliated me, insulted me, made me feel like a burden in my own home. But you kicked me out over a piece of cake, I screamed. And it was the first time in years I had let all my rage out. A damn piece of cake. Do you know what it feels like to be kicked out of your home by your own son? Over something so ridiculous. Michael started to cry. Mom, I didn't want to. Linda was just so stressed. Don't give me excuses, I yelled in his face. You allowed that woman to treat me like dirt. You chose to keep the peace with her instead of defending your mother. I turned to Linda, who looked like she was in shock. And you, my dear daughter-in-law, you hated me so much you couldn't even stand the sight of me. You charged me for breathing your air. You treated me worse than a stranger. Mother-in-law, Don't you call me mother-in-law, I roared. You lost that right the day you broke my mother's plate and screamed at me like I was a criminal. I returned to my spot in front of them, regaining my composure. So yes, I bought all your debts, and now I have the power to decide what to do with you. What? What are you going to do? Michael whispered. Well, I have several options. I can call in all the loans immediately and take the house, the car, garnish your wages until you pay me every last cent. Linda started to hyperventilate. Or, I continued, I can be generous and offer you a payment plan. What kind of plan? Michael asked desperately. Simple. You're going to pay me back the $125,000 in monthly installments of $1,000 for the next 10 years. $1,000 a month? That's impossible, Linda shrieked. Impossible. You used to spend more than that on restaurants and clothes every month when you thought you had money. But that would leave us with nothing to live on. Exactly what you left me with for 5 years. Nothing. Michael knelt in front of me. Mom, please. We're family. You can't do this to us. Family. My eyes filled with tears, but they were no longer tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation. Michael, when you kicked me out of this house over a piece of cake, you yourself said we weren't a family anymore. I was wrong, Mom. I was so wrong. Yes, you were. But it's too late for apologies. Linda found her voice. This is revenge. You're only doing this for revenge. No, Linda. This is justice. Revenge would be leaving you on the street with nothing, just like you planned to do to me. So, what do you want from us? Michael asked. I want you to learn what humility is. I want you to understand what it feels like to depend on the generosity of others. I want you to value what really matters in life. I headed for the stairs, but I stopped and turned back to them one last time. Oh, and one more thing. Since I am now your primary creditor, I technically get to decide whether you can continue living in this house or not. What do you mean? Linda asked in terror. I mean that starting today, I make the rules in this house. You will live according to my terms. You will treat me with the respect I deserve. And you will remember every single day who really holds the power here. I walked up the stairs, leaving them in the living room, crying, and trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. In my room, I sat in front of the mirror and really looked at myself for the first time in years. I no longer saw the frightened, submissive woman I had been. I saw a powerful, free woman who had reclaimed her dignity and her strength. I picked up the phone and called David. How does it feel to be a millionaire? He asked. It feels like justice, I replied. Pure and sweet justice. That night, for the first time in 5 years, I slept soundly, knowing I would never again have to ask for permission to exist, knowing I had reclaimed not only my power, but my dignity. Michael and Linda learned that night what it truly meant to be afraid of losing everything, and I learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to take back control of your life, to prove that older women are not disposable. The woman who had kicked me out over a piece of cake had awakened a lioness, and lionesses, once awakened, never go back to being lambs. 6 months after that night that changed everything, I woke up in my new house. Not the house where I'd lived for 30 years with my husband, nor the small room where I'd been relegated for 5 years of humiliation. This was my house, a 2-story mansion I had bought with my own fortune, in the best neighborhood in the city, with a garden, a swimming pool, and a view of the mountains. I got up slowly, put on my pink silk robe, and went down to breakfast in my dining room, where my housekeeper, a kind woman named Rebecca, had already prepared fresh coffee and French toast. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller." She greeted me with genuine warmth. "How did you sleep?" "Wonderfully, Rebecca, as always." While I ate breakfast, I reviewed my mail. There were thank you letters from the 3 charitable foundations I had established with part of my fortune, one for elderly women in vulnerable situations, one for single mothers needing housing, and a third for victims of family abuse. $2 million distributed among causes that truly mattered to me. There was also a report from my investment manager. My remaining $6 million had grown to nearly $7 million in these few months, thanks to smart investments in real estate and tech stocks. But the most interesting letter was from David. Michael and Linda had faithfully made their $1,000 monthly payments for 6 consecutive months. They hadn't missed a single day. The transformation had been dramatic. Michael had to get a second job, working nights as a security guard to make the payments. Linda had to go back to work for the first time in years, finding a job as a receptionist at a dental clinic. They could no longer afford expensive restaurants, designer clothes, or vacations. They cooked at home, shopped at discount markets, and had sold their car to buy a cheaper used one. But most importantly, they had learned the value of work, of effort, and of humility. Michael called me every Sunday, not to ask for money or favors, but simply to know how I was. In those conversations, little by little, I had begun to get back the son I thought I had lost forever. "Mom," he had said last week, "I wanted to apologize again, not just for kicking you out, but for all the years I let Linda treat you badly." "And why didn't you defend me, Michael?" I asked him directly. "Because it was easier to please her than to confront her. Because I thought you would always be there, no matter how we treated you. Because I took your love and your sacrifice for granted." Those words had been worth more than all the money in the world. Linda, for her part, had undergone an even more radical transformation. Work had humanized her in ways I never thought possible. She was no longer the spoiled, cruel woman who had made my life impossible. She was someone who understood what it meant to earn every dollar with the sweat of her brow. The last time I saw her, during one of my surprise visits to inspect the house, yes, as the creditor, I had that right. She asked to speak with me alone. "Mrs. Miller," she said, with tears in her eyes, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness after everything I did to you." "You're right," I replied, without softening my words. "You don't have that right." "I know, but I want you to know. I've learned what it's like to work hard, what it's like to worry about money, what it's like to have no power over your own life. And now I understand why you stayed silent for so many years. I understand what it's like to depend on others to survive." It was the first honest conversation we had had in 5 years. I finished my breakfast and went to my study, where I had a video conference with my lawyers in Dallas. I was considering expanding my brother Daniel's businesses, maybe opening a branch in my city. While I waited for the meeting to start, I reflected on the journey I had taken. I had started as a 67-year-old woman with no power, no money, no respect. A woman who had been kicked out of her home over a piece of cake. A woman who had signed her own eviction papers with trembling hands. Now, I was a 68-year-old woman with $8 million, 3 charitable foundations, my own mansion, and most importantly, the recovered respect of my family. It hadn't been revenge, as Linda had screamed that night. It had been justice. It had been teaching them that actions have consequences, that power can change hands, that older women are not invisible or disposable. My phone rang. It was Michael. "Mom, do you have plans for lunch on Sunday?" "Why?" "I wanted to invite you to eat. Linda is going to cook. Nothing fancy, just a home-cooked meal, like old times." Like old times. But this time, it would be different. This time, I would arrive as a guest, not as a maid. This time, they would serve me, not the other way around. "I would love to, Michael, I really would. But on one condition." "What's that?" "That you promise me, if you ever disrespect me again, or allow anyone else to, there will be no second chances." "I promise, Mom, with all my heart." I hung up the phone, smiling. The video conference began, and for the next hour, we discussed business expansions, real estate investments, and financial strategies. Words that, 6 months ago, I had never spoken in my life. When the meeting ended, I walked out into my garden. The roses I had planted last month were beginning to bloom. They were beautiful, strong, resilient, like me. I sat in my favorite chair under the pergola and closed my eyes, feeling the sun on my face. For the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of the future. I didn't have to ask permission for anything. I didn't have to justify my existence to anyone. I was free. Free to be generous or strict, as I saw fit. Free to forgive or keep my distance, as my heart dictated. Free to use my power as I best saw fit. And I had learned something fundamental. Respect isn't begged for. It's demanded. Dignity isn't given. It's defended. And it's never, ever, too late to take back control of your own life. That afternoon, while reviewing the financial statements for my foundations, I received an unexpected call. It was Abigail, my old neighbor, the one who had stopped visiting when Linda treated her so badly. "Helen, I just heard about your new situation. I'm so happy to know things turned out well for you." "Thank you, Abigail. Life has mysterious ways of balancing the scales. You know what? You should write a book about your story. It would be an inspiration to so many women who are going to go through the same thing." A book? The idea intrigued me. "Maybe I will, Abigail. Do you know what I'd call it?" "What?" "The piece of cake that changed my life." We laughed together, and in that laughter, there was joy, freedom, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, justice really does triumph. The sun set over my garden, painting the sky in golden colors. It was the end of a new day for a new woman, one who had been born from the ashes of humiliation. And tomorrow would be another day, to continue living on my own terms, with my own power, writing my own story.